Hello, old school comic reviews. Okay, this one's a little bit different. The reason for this video is I was on the CBR website, basically kind of checking out what was going on with the, some of the new titles coming out of the big DC revamp and whatnot. But I kind of stumbled upon a other article they had there that I thought was kind of interesting, or part of the article was interesting. It was an interview with Tom Brevoort, who's the Senior Vice President of Publishing down at Marvel Comics, and the interview was conducted by Judd Myers, who is a comic book retailer. I guess his store is called Earth 2. And most of it's, just talking about stuff that's coming out of Marvel, the new Cap #1s and Thor #1s that are coming out because of the movie and stuff like that. And I think he mentions a little bit in there about Marvel Man and Neil Gaiman and about how they may be ironing out their differences. So we may or may not be seeing, some new material come out featuring Marvel Man or whatever. But anyway, the part I thought was interesting, at one point, Judd Myers asked Tom Brevoort, he basically says, hey, Marvel Comics, you're your biggest comic book publisher in the world, you're super successful with all this superhero material. Why isn't it that Marvel does not have a kind of Vertigo type line, of different types of material out? And I thought it was pretty interesting. Basically, Tom Brevoort just basically says, we've tried to do other types of material, but it's been a real tough nut for us to crack, and we haven't been able to make it work for us. And why The Last Man gets brought up, and Tom basically says, hey, you know what, I've seen the sales numbers for the first 6 issues of Why the Last Man, and if that comic book, if it was the exact same comic book, was being published by Marvel, it would have been canceled. Why the Last Man would not have reached 12 issues or whatever. And he basically goes on to talk about stuff that I've kind of heard and read before about how the Vertigo titles, a lot of Vertigo titles really do not sell well at all in single issues, month to month. They actually sell a lot better when they're collected to trade, And basically he goes on to say stuff like, down there at DC, the hierarchy is a little bit different, and they obviously believe that it's worth their while to publish these comics at a deficit, just because they're able to build buzz, and then they're able to make all their money back on the back end when it's collected to trade. Where he says here at Marvel, we expect each issue of each book to do a certain amount of numbers or do a certain amount of sales to justify us publishing it. Each book's got to earn its own keep and so on and so forth. It's just that DC has a different business model than Marvel does, and I can kind of see that, in, just strictly in a business type way, But my thing is, it's basically just, it's pretty interesting. Well, actually, let's go back to here. I've seen some of these, different things that Marvel has tried to put out over the last several years, and a lot of times I find out about it, really by accident. I just stumble into the store, and just because I can't find what I'm looking for or whatever, I end up spending a lot more time in the store, and I come across these things that, I never even knew that Marvel was doing. There's the Stephen King stuff. Well, Stephen King's a known person, but, there's that stuff. There's the Philip K. Dick stuff. There's the Orson Scott Card stuff. There's comics based on, like, the novels of, like, Emily Bronte, Pride and Prejudice and Emma and stuff like that. I mean, wow, you know what I mean? And I just think, why isn't this stuff like, why don't they promote this stuff more? You know what I mean? I know intimate details about comics I have no intention of ever buying, but this stuff is just so, like, under the radar. I really think they should do a better job of promoting things, that are different than, their event comics and stuff like that. I remember, I don't know, a little while back, I was trying to look up something about some artist or something like that, and somehow I stumbled upon some link to an article about a comic they did called Apache Skies. It turns out this is like some re-envisioning of like their old Western characters as more, grittier, spaghetti Western types, you know what I mean? And, I don't know if it's good or if it's bad. I haven't picked it up, but it's like, I never even heard of this thing, and it just came out like a few years back, It's like, why aren't you promoting this stuff, I mean, maybe it'll be a hit, maybe it won't be, but, you put the news out there, put the word out there, put that bug in the ear of people that you think might be interested in it. Which leads to the big point, or actually that doesn't lead to the big point. It leads to a minor point, which is back in the day, Marvel did publish different formats for their different types of comics. They had their normal, mainstream superhero comics. They all had to be code approved, they're all kept at this pretty PG level, but they had other formats. I know in the 60s, or not the 60s, but the 70s and 80s, they had, black and white magazine comics, which is where they would do all kinds of like horror material and sword and sorcery material and violent stuff and whatnot, all kinds of different things. I know they had one comic called Crazy, which was like their version of Mad Magazine. They had something called I'm stumbling. It's called Marvel Preview, and later they changed the title to Bizarre Adventures. But it was basically, I guess you would call it, in a way, it was an anthology comic. Every issue was something different. So one issue might be a science fiction story. The next issue might be a kung fu action thing. The next issue might be sword and sorcery. The next issue might be one of their normal heroes moved over here for a more edgier type story, And, I mean, they were able to do that material back in the day, and sometimes it was a little violent, sometimes you might see a little nudity, but sometimes not, it wasn't all about the titillation or whatever. It was just a different way to tell different types of stories, I know in the 80s, up till, I don't know when they stopped Epic Comics, mid-90s, but, they had Epic Comics, which was their creator-owned line, and once again, different types of stories, science fiction, action, adventure, fantasy, what have you. And, and just like with the indies now and whatnot, the writers and artists, held on to the copyrights and the trademarks and things like that. I know Jim Starlin started out with Dreadstart, started out at Epic/Marvel. We moved it to First Comics after a while, which was indie back in the 80s. And I want to say, I'm not too sure if he took it someplace after that. I'm not 100% sure. But my point being, they had a line of, it was mostly creator-owned stuff. I think occasionally they, once again, did stuff like, I think they did an Elektra series. I know they did an Elektra series. I know there was one story that was Havoc and Wolverine team up, and the comic was called Meltdown or something like that. But the point is, they were able to do that material back then, They had an avenue for that stuff then. And, so it's not impossible for them to do it. So I guess that leads up to my big question, which is, would you want to see, a Vertigo-esque type line, coming from Marvel? And I'm not saying they should copy DC or whatever, but, just expand beyond just, superheroes and things like that. Me personally, I would love to see that. I would love it if they had a couple different lines or whatever, or maybe set it up in such a way, maybe rework the Max line some kind of way, where it's like, okay, here's going to be our horror line, and then here's going to be our crime comics, and here's going to be our romance comics, and here's our indie hipster comics, and maybe some of those comics would be, company property, and maybe some of them would be creator owned, or maybe they'd have even another creator owned line when it was just, and it's an open house, not like how they have like Icon now. Icon now is really this kind of like vanity label, it's just there for their select, 4 or 5, writers there. That's really to keep, Brian Michael Bendis and Mark Millar and Ed Brubaker, and who else is there? David Mack, and I think Matt Fraction, I think Casanova. I'm not 100% sure. I think Casanova comes out of Icon. I'm not sure. I don't know sure it's there if it's still over at Image. But my point is, it's there to keep these guys from going someplace else. But I'm saying, they should open it up so that anybody that has a good idea could come in and say, okay, here's my idea for an ongoing, or here's my idea for a single graphic novel, or here's my idea for a miniseries, and they just put it out, and I think everybody would benefit from that. I think, the fans would benefit from, just having a wider variety of material. The artists and writers would benefit because they'd have a chance to flex muscles, creative muscles that they don't get to use on like the FF or the Avengers or Thor or whatever. And then I think Marvel would benefit because then they would be expanding the image of their brand. They'd be able to say, well, sure, we've got the world's most popular superheroes, but we also have these other things that you would be interested in as well. Now that leads to my next question, which I kind of hinted on a little bit earlier, is why do you think they have had such a difficult time in the last, let's say, 10 years of selling things, other than, just their most popular characters? And I think, personally, it's just how do I want to put it? I think on one hand, I think it's a lack of commitment, and then I think it's also a lack of publicity. I think they just don't know at this point how to promote stuff that's not already popular. Like, I don't think they know how to reach people, who aren't already Spider-Man fans or Wolverine fans. They don't know how to go after the horror fans or the indie hipsters or the action fans or whatever, I think they just kind of put it out, and then when it doesn't, it's not an instant hit, they just forget about it. I think they don't have that long range view anymore, But anyway, that's my idea, but please, tell me what you think. I could be way off base, but that's just my gut talking, So yeah, but please, I would really love to hear what other people think, leave your comments or whatever. And please let me know what you think. I think if they, had a couple extra different lines, I think where they put other genres and maybe have more creative own stuff and really promoted it and build and we're dedicated to making it work, I think it could benefit everybody. Okay, I guess that's it. Thank you very much for listening. I appreciate your time, and please let me know what you think, and have a great day. Thanks.